On the 26th of October, at approximately 3:45 a.m., a series of reports emerged across Eastern Europe and Asia concerning a significant strategic event. These reports would soon highlight a major miscalculation in Beijing's recent military support ventures. What began as a $4.5 billion initiative, seemingly designed to influence the balance of power between Russia and Ukraine, has instead become an example of misjudgment regarding Ukraine's advanced capabilities in modern hybrid warfare. Beijing's initial strategy appeared comprehensive. As Russia faced prolonged sanctions, depleted weapon stockpiles, and reported morale issues, China quietly extended its hand. The plan involved supplying Moscow with advanced surveillance systems, missile components, and precision-guided drone platforms. These technologies were intended to enhance Russia's battlefield capabilities without requiring direct Chinese military involvement. On paper, the strategy offered several benefits. Beijing could strengthen an ally, test its latest military exports in a live combat environment, and potentially undermine Western influence, all while maintaining plausible deniability. However, the strategy's primary flaw was an underestimation of Ukraine's evolving cyber and intelligence infrastructure. Over the last year, Ukraine has become a proving ground for integrated warfare strategies that combine real-time intelligence, drone reconnaissance, and advanced analytics. Supported by international partners and a growing domestic defense tech sector, the result was a series of powerful explosions, allegedly detected by seismic sensors over 500 kilometers away. Within minutes, the entire shipment of critical components was destroyed. Satellite footage analyzed after the event shows smoke plumes rising over several kilometers, with secondary detonations indicating the destruction of drone control systems and other advanced weapon prototypes. For Beijing, this represented a significant financial and strategic setback. Years of quiet collaboration and investment in Russia's military efforts were neutralized in a single strike. What is particularly notable is the precision of the operation. Intelligence sources suggest the counterstrike's timing was chosen not only for maximum material damage, but also for psychological and diplomatic impact. The attack coincided with ongoing economic discussions between Beijing and several neutral states, where China had been presenting itself as a stabilizing force in Eurasia. The timing ensured that news of the failed operation would spread rapidly, potentially undermining Beijing's diplomatic posture. To understand the magnitude of this setback, it is crucial to examine what the $4.5 billion plan entailed. A large portion of the funding was directed toward next-generation reconnaissance drones. These were reportedly equipped with synthetic aperture radar and advanced optical sensors, designed to penetrate Western-supplied electronic jamming systems. These drones were intended to serve as Russia's primary reconnaissance tools over Ukraine's southern and eastern front lines, particularly in the Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk regions. Another part of the investment was reportedly tied to hypersonic missile tracking systems and adaptive targeting modules, technology China has been developing for its own modernization. By transferring these systems to Russia, Beijing may have hoped to evaluate their real-world performance. Ukraine's interception of these transfers changed the situation. Not only were the components destroyed, but the metadata from the intercepted communications may now provide Ukrainian analysts, and by extension, NATO, with a clearer understanding of China's emerging weapons architecture. For Moscow, the consequences are immediate. The destroyed convoy represented a major foreign resupply effort intended to reverse battlefield stagnation. With industrial output constrained by sanctions, Russia's reliance on foreign partners has become critical. This failure now forces the Kremlin to reassess its dependencies, potentially increasing internal tensions. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the official reaction has been restrained. State media outlets have not directly acknowledged the incident, referring instead to unverified reports of cargo loss along Central Asian routes. Behind closed doors, China's defense firms went into quiet panic mode, with state auditors investigating whether internal leaks contributed to the intelligence breach. This event underscores a shifting dynamic in modern conflict, where smaller, agile nations, armed with advanced technology and adaptive strategies, can counter larger powers. Ukraine's operation has demonstrated that warfare in the 21st century is increasingly influenced by information dominance. As the morning after the explosions began, satellite imagery from multiple independent monitoring groups started circulating, confirming the scale of the destruction near Orenburg. The images revealed dozens of craters across an industrial complex, marking the impact points of precision strikes. What had been a secretive joint operation had become a public incident. Within hours, international media outlets began reporting on the story. Initial descriptions of a logistical disaster quickly shifted as details emerged, reframing the event as the exposure of a covert support operation. Beijing's curated image as a restrained global power, one that avoids direct entanglement in foreign conflicts, came under scrutiny. For China, the timing was disadvantageous. Beijing had been positioning itself as a diplomatic mediator, hosting forums aimed at portraying itself as a stabilizing force. The revelation that it had quietly funneled $4.5 billion in military support to Moscow undercut that narrative. Western analysts described the development as a significant blow to China's foreign policy credibility. In response, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs released a brief statement describing the reports as fabrications designed to sow discord. Yet, within defense circles, the loss of advanced drone prototypes and tracking systems meant not just material damage, but the potential exposure of critical technological blueprints to Western intelligence agencies. In Moscow, the reaction was less public. Russian state television initially described the event as a fire at a fuel depot. However, leaked footage circulating on social media showed massive secondary explosions and wreckage, with independent analysts identifying components linked to Shenzhen-based defense manufacturers. The destroyed systems had been intended to equip frontline units for winter operations, and their loss creates a strategic gap that Ukrainian commanders could exploit. In Washington and Brussels, the reaction was one of validation. Western intelligence agencies had long suspected that China was supplying Moscow with dual-use technology. The confirmation provides new leverage. Discussions are reportedly underway about extending targeted sanctions to Chinese firms linked to the transfer. The European Union was unusually direct. EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell noted that any state enabling Russia's continued aggression bears responsibility for the consequences. Though China was not named explicitly, the implication was clear. Several European capitals called for urgent consultations on tightening export controls. Perhaps the most significant reaction came from nations positioned between the two spheres of influence, such as India, Turkey, and Brazil. For them, the incident represented a turning point. Beijing's attempt to present itself as a neutral power now stood in sharp contrast to the evidence. In New Delhi, defense analysts argued that the revelations strengthen the case for deeper cooperation with Western intelligence networks. Back in Kyiv, the mood was one of cautious validation. Officials refrained from overt celebration. President Volodymyr Zelensky described the counterstrike as a testament to the nation's resolve and technological maturity, emphasizing that Ukraine's defense capabilities are now not just reactive, but preemptive. The underlying message was that Ukraine's success was no longer dependent solely on Western aid. The country had evolved into a force capable of conducting sophisticated, intelligence-driven operations. In academic and policy circles, the incident renewed debate over warfare in the digital age. Analysts described Ukraine's counterstrike as a textbook example of asymmetric deterrence, where smaller nations leverage data and adaptability to offset the advantages of larger adversaries. For Beijing, that insight is problematic. In the days following the strike, cybersecurity experts within China's defense sector reportedly initiated a sweeping audit of communication networks. Early leaks suggest a counterintelligence failure, acknowledging the breach likely originated from sophisticated infiltration, not brute force hacking. The strategic consequences were profound. China's global military-industrial outreach, which relies heavily on secrecy, was undermined, making partner nations wary of covert procurement. Diplomatic repercussions were immediate at the United Nations. Perhaps the most significant reaction came from nations positioned between the two spheres of influence, such as India, Turkey, and Brazil. For them, the incident represented a turning point. Beijing's attempt to present itself as a neutral power now stood in sharp contrast to the evidence. In New Delhi, defense analysts argued that the revelations strengthened the case for deeper cooperation with Western intelligence networks. Back in Kyiv, the mood was one of cautious validation. Officials refrained from overt celebration. President Volodymyr Zelensky described the counterstrike as a testament to the nation's resolve and technological maturity, emphasizing that Ukraine's defense capabilities are now not just reactive, but preemptive. The underlying message was that Ukraine's success was no longer dependent solely on Western aid. The country had evolved into a force capable of conducting sophisticated, intelligence-driven operations. In academic and policy circles, the incident renewed debate over warfare in the digital age. Analysts described Ukraine's counterstrike as a textbook example of asymmetric deterrence, where smaller nations leverage data and adaptability to offset the advantages of larger adversaries. For Beijing, that insight is problematic. In the days following the strike, cybersecurity experts within China's defense sector reportedly initiated a sweeping audit of communication networks. Early leaks suggest a counterintelligence failure, acknowledging the breach likely originated from sophisticated infiltration, not brute force hacking. The strategic consequences were profound. China's global military-industrial outreach, which relies heavily on secrecy, was undermined, making partner nations wary of covert procurement. Diplomatic repercussions were immediate at the United Nations, where Western representatives reportedly presented evidence linking Chinese firms to the convoy. Despite China's denials, diplomatic pressure grew. Beyond diplomacy, financial markets reacted. Shares of Chinese defense and logistics companies fell, reflecting investor concerns over sanctions and reputational damage. The incident had clearly evolved beyond the battlefield, becoming a global test of trust that revealed vulnerabilities in China's strategic ambitions. In the days following the Orenburg explosion, the conversation shifted. The event is increasingly recognized as a defining moment, where the traditional order of power, based on industrial scale, is challenged by a new paradigm shaped by data and agility. For Ukraine, the successful interception was a declaration that the country has fully transitioned into the age of intelligent warfare. For over 2 years, Russia's strategy relied on an assumption that Ukraine would falter. Beijing's covert involvement was designed to reinforce that. But Ukraine's counterstrike proved that conflicts are increasingly won through adaptability and the ability to outthink an opponent. In Kyiv, the 3:45 a.m. operation is being studied as a model for future defense strategy, termed integrated deterrence. This framework combines intelligence, cyber infiltration, and selective kinetic action. This event also underscores a transformation in Ukraine's global image, now seen as a center for 21st century defense innovation. For China, the implications extend beyond the financial loss. Internally, Beijing faces skepticism over 2 primary fears: that similar security breaches may exist elsewhere, and that its entire defense export model is now compromised, resulting in reputational damage that could take years to reverse. The most profound consequence, however, is psychological. Beijing's cultivated image of strategic infallibility has been shattered, exposing a rare vulnerability in its geopolitical maneuvering. In Moscow, the fallout is severe. The Kremlin's inner circle is reportedly divided. The loss underscores the danger of over-reliance on foreign support, while alienating Beijing could isolate Russia further. This dynamic marks a broader geopolitical shift: the erosion of the Moscow-Beijing axis as a stable counterweight to Western power. The failure reveals an asymmetry, with Russia as the dependent actor and China as the investor. Meanwhile, Ukraine's network of alliances continues to expand. Several nations have expressed renewed interest in defense cooperation with Kyiv, not as solidarity, but as a strategic investment. Nations like Poland, Finland, and Japan are reportedly in talks with Ukrainian defense tech firms to exchange expertise. At the same time, NATO leadership is analyzing the implications of the intelligence breakthrough. The intercepted Chinese communications may provide insights that reshape Western defense planning in the Indo-Pacific. Across the world, smaller nations are drawing lessons from Ukraine's example. Sovereignty in the modern age is secured by intelligence, adaptability, and resilient partnerships. Analysts in Washington have begun using the phrase Orenburg effect, a shorthand for how a single, well-executed cyberkinetic operation can neutralize billions in military investment. As the dust settles, Ukraine's transformation marks a new era in international security. Its victory over the supply network is a blow to the idea that authoritarian regimes can manipulate global systems with impunity. China may retreat into greater secrecy, while Russia becomes more isolated. Meanwhile, Ukraine and its allies are likely to double down on intelligence cooperation, setting the stage for a new deterrence architecture that prizes agility over brute force.